nervous like I'm playing live.
I know. I know.
I'm like sitting there going, shit. I'm like, my hands are shaking. How do we define a riff? Yeah, that's great.
Is a hook and a riff the same thing?
The riffs are not hard to play. This is the brilliance of the composition.
I remember just like putting on that album and being stoned and listening to it over and over again. It was...
Looks like a riff, tastes like a riff, smells like a riff, but does not have the same compositional significance.
Right. Welcome to Rock and Roll Royalty. I'm Patrick Gentempo. In this episode, we're going to talk about something I think you're going to have a big interest in, and that is the top rock and roll riffs of all time. I mean, what is rock and roll without its riffs? And myself, Joey G, and Mark Guitar God Skenga, we're going to have a conversation around these riffs, and actually there might be some demonstrations of some of these riffs. So in this episode, we're not counting down the riffs, we're just discussing our favorite riffs in general. And it becomes a very fascinating conversation. What is a riff? What constitutes a riff? What are some of the greatest riffs and the most recognizable riffs in varying songs, etc.? So it's a very fascinating conversation. If you love rock and roll like I love rock and roll, you're going to really enjoy this episode. And let me just remind you that if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you're notified when we're creating new content, which we're doing all the time. And of course, I'm sure you might have some comments that you want to leave below. We read all the comments. If you got recommendations for shows that you'd like to see us produce, let us know. We'll take that into strong consideration also. Enjoy the show. Joey G and Mark Skenga. Good to be with you guys. We've got a very interesting show today. If there's anything that rock and roll is known for, it's its famous riffs. Mark and I, had a conversation. Joe and I have a couple of conversations too. And we're talking about this. How do we define a riff? What's a riff versus maybe that's kind of, more just playing some, some melody and maybe some lead as compared to say, no, that's a distinct riff. And Mark, because you're a jazz player also, this comes from the jazz community. How do you describe a riff? If somebody says, hey, that's a great riff, what do they mean?
Well, the funny part of it is that the words are sometimes used interchangeably. But I think what we're talking about when we're thinking of these great rock and roll riffs, we're talking about compositional ideas that are short, simple, melodic things. And I think our examples are going to best lay that out. They're repetitive. So the typical riff song, you know it because that riff is repeating. A lot of times the riff repeats on a different chord. So a lot of the songs that we talked about are 12-bar blues. So the riff happens on the 1 chord, and then the riff happens on the 4 chord. Some of them it'll even happen on the 5 chord. Not usually, but it does happen. So I guess the main thing is the short melodic idea with the repetition, and that is integral to the composition.
And gives it sort of like the signature, for the song, right?
Well, right. Yeah.
And we're not, a lot of times, riffs are talked about as, and probably most predominantly guitar riffs, but all the instruments can, have kind of a riff, right? Joey G, I think you probably have some piano riffs scheduled for
piano
today.
riffs. There's bass riffs, of course. Yes.
Yeah, and I got one I'm going to throw out that's a vocal riff. So so it's kind of interesting, and we could have the conversation, debate. Oh, that's really not a riff, So we'll have that conversation. I think that's a part of how we kind of dissect this. The other thing I'll bring up that before we jump in and start throwing these out and maybe demo some of them is that it's not also just the notes and the timing of the notes that make up the riff. For me, the real power, I think what makes the great riff is the sound it has, right? It's like certain sounds that a guitarist is going to get out of their guitar, like the Smoke on the Water riff. It isn't just the actual riff. It is the sound that Ritchie Blackmore is getting out of his guitar when he plays the riff that I think really gives it its feel. Or if you go like a Back in Black, AC/DC, it's just like there's this certain sound that they get that if you play it kind of on a different guitar, different rig, different setup, it's probably not going to have the same feel. It's not going to give you goosebumps like so many of these riffs.
It may not, but I want to point out part of what makes these things riffs and makes them so good is that if you play it on a different guitar without the sound, you still recognize it.
Oh, you recognize it, yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
I think
You
what
still
made
know
it
it.
famous was just sort of like the impact that it has when it hits
Right,
you.
right.
And I'm a little geeky on reading about so much of the background or watching documentaries and when the guitarists, many of these guitarists who made these riffs that we're going to talk about, they had a certain sound in mind, that they were trying to get, and they talk about the different setups they had to try to get that sound and how they finally found it. Or, if they wanted, like, I think I was reading, with Leslie West and Mississippi Queen, and, how he got the preamp, to kind of push it to a certain level and what he plugged into versus what he could have plugged into to get a certain sound. It's interesting how they really work to get, like, they had something in their head and they heard it in their head and they wanted to get it in reality. And there were a lot of machinations they went through to get it there. So I think that's kind of fun. But to your point, Mark, once it's a known riff, you can, I hear Joey G all the time playing, the Layla riff on a keyboard, and it excites me, So it's
Right,
it's
you still know it. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All my piano influences were guitarists. So I was always playing Jimmy Page riffs on piano, and then I got to electric pianos, and it was even cooler. But it was never sound like Jimmy Page. It didn't have the same tone and didn't have that sound. But the notes for note, you could tell I was playing "Live and Lovin' Maid," let's say.
Yeah. Oh, I remember being at home and listening to you play that. But the cool thing is that it since it's known, it's kind of exciting to hear it out of other instruments. I mean, Mark, you make a living, taking electric guitar riffs and putting them on an acoustic guitar and getting out in front of an audience and playing them. Like on my list, the Sweet Child of Mine's on my list, but I've heard you do that acoustically, and I'm like, it's mind blowing to me. So we're gonna have some fun today with these things.
Absolutely.
So Mark, what do you want to start with?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to start with the one. It's the first riff I became aware of, because when I was a kid and your friends found out you played the guitar, they always said, "Oh, can you play Day Tripper?" Well, so this song illustrates my
So Mark
point.
doesn't play just the riff; he's playing the melody.
Well, 50 years later, I learned the rest of that. I bumped into a guy in Victor's House of Music years ago. John, the salesman, says, "Mark, come here. You got to listen to this guy." And this guy had worked it out. This must have been, I don't know, 35 years ago, and it was just mind-boggling to hear him do it. And then, of course, Tommy Emmanuel came out with his version of it. So I said, well, if you guys can do it, I can do it too. But hey, listen to this song. It's based, that little guitar part, that's the riff. The melody is in addition to it. And in this song, as in many of the riff songs, the melody happens at the same time as the riff. But this song,
I think when the Beatles did it, it was two guitars.
Yes, well, or a vocal on a guitar.
Yeah,
but
vocal on guitar.
The interesting part, and I think I'm going to throw this out as one of my definitions of a riff song, is that if I'm playing, I could say, "Got a good reason for taking the easy way out." Not the same effect as
The same.
So
You're right. Yeah, that's first of all, that was one of the I think that's one of the great all-time rock and roll riffs. Very recognizable, and I can remember when that song came out. I was a little kid, but when it came out, my sister's room, who was next to mine, she had that on a 45, and I remember
wow.
dropping and playing that thing on that 45 over and over again, and that that riff is like just in my brain. I could probably name it in a note or two. But so yeah, that's a great one, an early one, early Beatles, early rock and roll. It's good stuff. Thanks for that demo, Mark.
My pleasure.
So Joey G, what riff comes to your mind?
When you were handed this assignment, I had to think about riffs and what for the greatest songs. I mean, for the best songs, all good songs from the '60s had a riff. I believe at least had, some kind of hook. Is a hook and a riff the same thing?
Well,
let's talk
sure.
about that.
It's a riff is an instrumental hook.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I kind of see them as the same thing. I mean, I think there's other types of hooks other than riffs, but a riff is a hook, a type of hook. Yeah.
Right.
Well
so
said.
when I was thinking about, I had to think about what songs don't I turn off, because I've heard them too often. So can a great song with a good riff be overplayed? I was thinking to myself, and in my case, I don't think I can. If I hear the song with the riff I like, I've heard "Sunshine of Your Love," which is probably one of the songs somebody selected,
Right.
which is probably, I think, the greatest riff, or one of the top 5 at least, certainly. Of rock. But I hear that, I listen to it every time. That and White Room, for some reason. But I think it's the wah-wah on White Room that he has me. I wait for the last solo, really, for the wah-wah.
Yeah, I just, it's funny you say that. I just heard White Room yesterday I was driving down the road. And Joey, you and I are in the near future going to go see Clapton up in Boston.
Right.
And they had that as a part of their set, White Room, in Europe. Then Clapton decided to take it out. So my friend plays guitar with Clapton in the band, Doyle Bramhall, who at some point I think is going to come on and be a guest on the show. But and I'm hoping they do it in Boston, because he played, like, he basically, I think, handled a lot of the guitar work and sang White Room when Clapton was performing it recently in Europe. Then Clapton took it out because he thought it was too jolting going from the acoustic set into White Room, or vice versa, White Room into the acoustic set. So to kind of soften the transition, they took it out. But I'm hoping they put it back in, because I love that song, and the wah-wah in it is extraordinary. But what would be... So what's the riff in White Room, right? It's like I was thinking about this, and let's discuss that, because it kind of starts like a like that opening vocal is like... with the in a Ginger Baker on the drum, dum, 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 ba, da, 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 dum. So his lead work on that with the wah-wah is just transcendent. But so is there a riff in White Room that what we would call a riff in White Room?
I would say that the intro has a riff.
Mm-hmm.
Right, zam ba ga ga gum ga ga gum zam da ga ga gum ga 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 zam da ga 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 gum. Right, so that's.
But is that a drum riff? Is the drum riff the riff, or is it the guitar?
They play it. They all 3 of them play it. So the intro goes. Can't remember the last chord there. But you get the idea that you have the melody and the chord, and then, which you're saying, is that a drum riff? Well, the drum's playing that, but so is the bass.
Yeah, they're all doing it together, and a vocal. So it's,
the vocal's not in at that point yet.
Aren't they going like, isn't there kind of like that falsetto vocal that's a part of that too? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's a good point.
So now the question is, then this is the conversation. So is that a riff when you have multiple instruments creating the sound? And I'm not advocating one versus the other. I'm just curious as to how,
I don't think it's a riff the way,
Not in the purest sense. No, I wouldn't say it is.
The way
but it's a signature. And so I think that's maybe like a signature or a hook, but maybe not quite a riff, right?
Okay.
So, yeah.
I think I'm going to agree with you there, Pat.
Yeah.
That's a good question for
Doyle. Well, you'll be able to ask him personally when we get there. We see him in Boston. What do you think? You play this song publicly, in arenas. What do you think?
Right.
So going back to what you were saying, Joe, you said that things that you can listen to over and over again, not get sick of, are probably the greatest ones.
Well, that would put it in the greatest category. It's funny because I'll listen and this isn't a riff, of course, but if I'm flipping through my Sirius radio and all of a sudden I hear "Stairway to Heaven," unless I hear the drums playing, which is in the last two, I think, verses,
Right.
I don't listen to the whole song. I want to hear that solo, which isn't a riff.
Right.
I don't believe.
No.
But so that's a song. That's a great song, and I've heard it a million times. So it can be overplayed. A good song can be overplayed. But one with a great riff, I don't think I'll listen to. What's my list here? Like like I said, "Sunshine of Your Love." Another one, "All Right Now." I'll listen to that every time I hear it because I love that.
That is
opening
a
guitar.
great riff. Now let me add. So here's another good question: is you talked about the Stairway to Heaven guitar solo. We're gonna do a show on guitar solos coming up here in a bit, but the solo, arguably one of the best rock and roll solos of all time, at least the studio version, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
There is a riff that gets introduced in the solo. It's kind of because they're doing the A minor G F. Then he goes like the dun 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 dun, and that's kind of like a riff he throws in. Yeah. That last part of Stairway to Heaven, he's playing the solo and, the rhythm's doing it. So would that be considered, that part, considered a riff? It comes in. It's got a distinct, set of, series of notes, right? And it kind of it's a signature, of that
Well,
little.
I can say this from being at literally thousands of rehearsals. The musicians are going to turn to one another and say, "Hey, play that lick again," or "Can you do that lick you did last Saturday night?" Lick and riff being interchangeable.
I was going to just say, so is a lick and a riff the same thing, right?
I don't know that they're the same thing, but we certainly use the phraseology interchangeably. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to make this observation, if I may, which is that I think we have different degrees of compositional importance. Some riffs, the whole song is based on, like Joe brings up "Sunshine of Your Love," right? I mean, definitely The song is built on that riff. Yep. And now here's a riff that is definitely a riff. It qualifies. It has all the, looks like a riff, tastes like a riff, smells like a riff, but does not have the same compositional significance, right? It's a lesser, it's compositional, but in a smaller sense.
Yeah. So and I like that because it's like, can you play that lick again? Okay, that's cool.
That would be typical thing. Can you play that riff? Can you play that lick? Or what are we going to do for an intro? Well, let's play the riff from the chorus.
God, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. So Joey, what piano ones spoke to you?
Well, the riff on piano that I gravitate to every time I hear it is the "Hold the Line" from Toto. That it comes with I think a sharp drum hit and then some boom 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 boom, right into it, and it's and the bass comes in and it's somewhat mesmerizing to me, And I'll tell you, the timing out of it was a little funny. It took me, I never really sat down and tried to learn it, but I think it's 24 bars, and it's like 6 the first one, then 2, then 4. It's in even numbers at least. It's like 6, then 2, then 4, then 6, then 3, then 3. Actually, it's not all even, but as far as the position changes, and then it's, I don't know, but every time I hear it, I never shut it off.
Yeah, well, let's get a little demo on that.
It's so interesting when you hear the piano riff because at a point there's two separate things going on, which the guitar riffs don't generally have that.
Right, it does that. You know what? I'll tell you something. You got to practice.
Oh, really?
Because it's a little tricky, and once you practice it, you have it. But it takes a little bit more practice, especially for me. I don't know. But,
well, for anybody. I mean, all this stuff requires practice, especially if you want to play it right and play it well. But,
right. It's funny. You don't see the musicians practicing. You hear what they're doing, and it sounds like it's the easiest thing ever, and you forget there's thousands of hours behind that of practice.
Yeah. Well, Joey G. Sometimes he's working on a song. I don't know, maybe it's 1 o'clock in the morning or something, and I get a text with a little audio file of whatever the song is he's working on the acoustic piano. Says, "How's this sound?" It's usually either the Cars or it's some other stuff he's been working on lately, but it's pretty fun stuff. Mm-hmm. So, all right, I guess I'm going to throw one out that it doesn't always come up. Although I think it's one of the great, most recognized rock and roll riffs. It's a song I really love. And, like anything else, it comes from my high school days. It's just like there's a connection. Music is the ultimate anchor, right? You can listen to a song and it immediately takes you to a point in time that could be decades ago, where you were, what you were doing, etc. And this is one that just takes me back to high school. My hair was down to here, and we were doing things that we probably shouldn't have been doing. So see if you could spot this one.
Yeah.
What a great song.
Right, that's so obviously the drums and everything comes in Aqualung, right?
Of course.
Also love the guitar solo in that song. One of my all-time favorites.
Great song, great band, great riff, actually.
Yeah, great riff. And that to me is a class. Like that's if we're trying that doesn't blur the lines. Is this a riff? Is that not a riff? That's a riff, right? That's just like a clear.
Well, and then doesn't he actually sing those exact notes as the vocal begins?
He does.
Yeah.
Sitting on the park bench. Yeah. So he does. Yeah. It's like so. It's kind of so. I guess it's interesting because it's kind of like a guitar riff that then leads to the vocal melody, right?
Well, I think that speaks to what a riff really is, which is that it's a guitar part or a piano part, but it's also can be the melody of the song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like in Sunshine of Your Love, right? It's getting near dawn. He's literally singing. Yeah.
And then, because it does the beginning, but the whole song riffs out, right? It starts out kind of like with the. But then the actual when they break into the song, so the vocal kind of picks up the riff, right? It's following the same pattern. The guitars. So it's kind of doing that same, and obviously Clapton plays with it and gets his...
Right, yeah, he embellishes it, but we're still dealing with the same compositional material. I'm starting to sound like a professor, but that's...
We're going to call you the professor. You don't call Neil Peart the professor of the drummer. So
right.
We're going to call you the professor. But no, that's true. And, so the whole song is the riff, in essence, all the way through, except, when they go to the chorus. So that's, but then it goes right back in. So
right.
Yeah, so that's an example of almost a whole song that's a riff. There's a few of those too.
Yes. Yes.
And then sometimes it comes back to the chorus, right? It becomes like, I'm trying to think.
Well, the song doesn't have to only have one riff. It could have two riffs or two hooks, right? So even though the chorus of Sunshine of Your Love is not a riff, it's a recognizable hook, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think it's just, the way that it just, and again, that's kind of the ensemble part of it. It's, the guitar, the bass, the drum, how they're just kind of like, that comes
stacking
together. Let's look at, why don't we look at Smoke on the Water? That,
jumping into the mother here.
But what happens is when it goes into the singing, it doesn't do that anymore, right? In other words, you're not carrying the riff in the chorus, right? They're just kind of like on the on the chord. I guess it's the G, but they just and then it goes to the chorus. I don't know if you know of the chorus, but it kind of like when you're going smoke on the. It starts. It's like the riff in reverse. Smoke on the water, fire in the sky, right? So it's kind of in reverse, and then Then it goes to the riff. So it's kind of interesting.
It is interesting. So this song, I mean, it's perfect, Pat. You brought up a contrasting song to Sunshine of Your Love, where the riff now is the intro, and it's a hook, right? I mean, think of it. The average person, if you said, do you know Smoke on the Water? They say, sure, dun, 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 dun. And they probably couldn't sing any of the rest of the song.
I could.
Well, you could.
I mean, I can't sing it well. It's not a song I can sing, but I know the words.
But you know what I'm saying. It's one of those things.
Course.
People think they know the song. They know this hook. And then the verse of the song is not the hook. The chorus of the song is not the hook, even though, as you pointed out, it has compositional similarities to it. Mm-hmm. And that's a hook, right? Where he sings, smoke on the water, the fire in the sky. That's the typical hook of the chorus. But the real hook of the song, the thing that makes this song iconic the way it is, you know, the riff that you're playing, right? What? So here's a funny aside about this song. There's a jazz song, Brazilian jazz song I play all the time. Certainly a completely different direction, right? But the end of the song has a vamp. Just the typical 2-chord vamp. And a lot of the musicians, I don't know how it came about. It's like everybody all at once, you're playing the song. And in that, pretty soon you'll get as a way to end the song. Isn't that funny? Right?
Wow.
It's like what we do, you know how, you know, you with a bunch of your old friends and you'll reference like a joke that you know everybody knows. You'll just hit the punchline of a joke.
That's and like a little musical joke that you get. See, can you tell why he's the teacher and I'm the student? Why do I play like every finger on my left hand is broken and he can do that? So anyway, but that's you know, again, I love those little insights and how you can you find a place that perfectly places that riff right in concert with that Brazilian song. It's you know, that's crazy.
First time I heard it, I literally was laughing out loud. You know, like, oh, that's funny. And, you know, I mean, I've certainly heard guys do other stuff. You know, I was playing in an Israeli band for many years, and, you know, those big dance sets with the horror songs and the bride and groom up on the chairs. And in the middle of those songs, they'll throw in rock and roll riffs like this.
I love it. So, Mark, what riff you got for us next?
Oh, my goodness. I'm gonna, you know, sorry, at my age, you know, I got a lot of riffs here. Okay, I'm going to throw one out that I'm not sure you guys will all know offhand, but to me, it's the ultimate riff song. This song is by the Meters. The Meters are a famous New Orleans instrumental group, and they were the original backup band for the Nevilles. In fact, one of the Neville brothers, I think it's Art Neville, is the piano player in the band. And they wrote this song. And by the way, you know, if you're thinking, well, what's this guy talking about, you know, the Meters for? The Meters were so cool that when Paul McCartney threw his big birthday party bash, this is going back several years, more than several years, decade or two, and it was the Meters that he hired to be the band at the party.
No
Okay,
kidding.
anyway, yeah, let's check out the Meters song. It's called Sissy Strut. And this song is really interesting because you can hear that it's a riff, right? But then there's a second riff, which is this. And then the whole thing begins again, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I don't know the song, but that's a cool riff. A lot of funk in it, right?
Right, a lot of funk in it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're a very funky band, as most of the bands from New Orleans are. And I thought of this song. This is a song that I play frequently on gigs, especially, somebody falls by to sit in, and I don't expect them to know the rest of my repertoire. I say, hey, let's play Sissy Strut. It's really an easy one. And, it goes over big with audiences. Meters are a great band. I'll tell you what, next time you're driving around, check out your, on your radio or whatever app you're using.
Spotify or whatever.
Spotify, yeah, man. Pandora. Their records are really interesting. And just quintessential riff song for me.
I love it. Good one. I like getting some of these. I guess it wouldn't be a deep track, but some of these unknown, little known, off the beaten path type tracks. That's a cool one. We'll look that up. Joey G, what do you got? Another one on the piano?
Well, actually, this is a guitar one.
A guitar one.
Guitar
okay,
riffs guitar riffs really do rule, I think, for the most part. And I was trying to think of, Jimi Hendrix had a lot of good riffs, I believe. Yeah. But my favorite is, and every time I hear it on the radio, I leave it on and turn it up, is the Voodoo Child's Slight Return, especially I think that's a riff, right, Mark? Would you call that a riff? That open, it's like, it's very dynamic and loud. And Mark, do you know this riff?
Sort of, kind of. Right? Am I on the...
I think, close, Mark. That's very close.
Incidentally, just people know. Mark, we didn't have that prepared. I wasn't sure if Mark would know, or Joe. I guess if Mark would know that riff. He just picks up.
I kind of threw that one in on you.
I know that one. Anyway, yeah. I think you kind of know it, Mark. That was pretty good.
That was good, Mark. Stevie Ray does that also, does a cover of it. It's a little bit cleaner than Jimi Hendrix's version. Yeah. I think the guitar is not as fuzzy or stuff, which I think I enjoy that one as much, if not more sometimes. Both of them are great, though.
They're both great. And that is Hendrix, and the sound that he gets, and that's one of those ones I can hear over and over again and never get sick of.
Yeah, that's why I always turn it up, and people in downtown Portsmouth look at me. All you need is the black Trans Am, and I'd be all set.
Yeah, perfect.
So I'm going to bring one up because I've heard Mark do this acoustically. So Sweet Child of Mine, Slash, phenomenal guitarist. I think everybody here agrees that we love Slash. But Mark did his own rendition of this on acoustic that is, I thought, quite fascinating. So maybe we can ask you to do that riff for us, Mark.
Let's see if I can.
Famous Guns N' Roses riff. Doing it with, kind of on the acoustic with the harmonics. Yeah, that's.
Well, that was my solution. I started working on the song, and I couldn't get around back to the other parts quick enough, and I got the idea for the harmonics, and what an iconic riff that is. And this one is, I want to point out musically. So you have the melodic riff, da 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 da, and then the chord changes. So it starts off with, I'm in the key of D. I'm playing this riff over a D bass, but then this is the same melody. In my arrangement, I'm an octave lower, but it's the same exact melody that I just played. But now it's over a C chord, and then same melody again over a G chord. So that's interesting. Like, we've had riffs so far that the whole riff transposed, like Sunshine of Your Love, right? It goes to the 4 chord and the whole thing moves up. In this one, the riff stays the same while the chord changes.
So yeah, the chord's changing underneath it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a cool. So structurally, it's interesting to see how these things come together, right? I mean, that's a part of what I guess gives them character.
Right.
Defines them. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so I actually asked for that one, Mark. Give me another one that you like.
What about Happy Birthday?
Happy birthday. Yeah, go ahead and do that. I haven't thought about that as being one. Yeah, that's
I mean, that's again one of the quintessential early riff songs. I like to go to these early things because I feel like they inform what comes later.
And with that one, kind of contrasting what you were just saying about "Sweet Child of Mine" is that the riff is the same sequence of notes, relative notes, but they're changing with the chords, right?
Right. In fact, you can see it as I play this. I literally take the same shape, I move it up one string to the A string, and I'm playing the same thing. Or I could have moved it up here. And that's, the guitar informing rock and roll. Right, because the nature of the guitar and the bottom four strings being all even, guys just moved up and down or moved over one string, and now we're in the new key.
Yeah, another riff that brings to mind is "One Way Out." Right, kind of does the same thing, right?
Yes, it kind of does the same thing. One Way Out's doing it two different ways, though.
And then then it drops to, like you said, one string down, right? It's kind of like the blues, the three chords.
Right, it's totally the blues. We have these two songs share that in common. That at least that section of Happy Birthday and One Way Out, they're both 12-bar blues doing that.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, do you notice that on the Allman Brothers record, Duane Allman stays high on the slide guitar with the riff in the original key as the bass and the other instruments change to the four chord.
Right.
You're right.
That's correct. He's still playing it in the
he's playing
first
that high slide, which I think makes the song
right?
So great, right?
Dwayne
Amazing.
Playing slide.
How many times have we seen the Allman Brothers, Joey G?
A few.
Remember they used to do his residencies at the Beacon Theater? They'd be there for 15 nights or something.
Yeah,
or
2 weeks.
Like
10 shows or whatever.
Yeah. We used to go get a lot of them. I think they're they always had two drummers, and they used to do drum solos that might go for 45 minutes.
Oh, remember? Yeah, especially especially in the 70s. He did.
Yeah. Oh, wow. We would sit there, and all of a sudden, the rest of the band would leave, and the drummers are going back and forth in drum solos for literally 40, 45 minutes sometimes.
Wow. Joey, did you ever catch Dwayne while he was still alive?
You know what? No, he had passed away before I got. That's just when I first started seeing shows. I didn't, but. No, I never got to see him live. No.
Yeah, me either, and that's one of my great disappointments.
Right. You just missed him.
There is always YouTube.
Right. That's where I see him live. Yeah.
We see him live on YouTube all the time.
Not enough though.
Joey, give us another one of your faves.
I'm gonna have to go into my and again we touched on Led Zeppelin, but I think Jimmy Page is the riff master and borrower of rock and roll. We all know the background of some of the songs,
right?
But he has so many from Black Dog, which is I don't know if Black Dog is really a riff or not. I think it kind of is. That
I think it is.
Yeah, and then what else? I mean, right down to the Whole Lot of Love is probably the king of riffs. I think, along with Smoke on the Water. Go ahead, Pat.
I mean, A Whole Lot of Love is like a riff song. I mean,
the whole song is the riff.
The whole song is the riff. Yeah.
Right, and then right down to the Over the Hills and Far Away.
I'm really glad you brought up Whole Lot of Love because I think I've actually seen Whole Lot of Love at the top of riff charts sometimes, saying it's one of the greatest. Mark, do you know Whole Lot of Love by chance?
Boy, do I know it. it's so simple, right? But it's
Right.
so instantly recognizable.
It is, you know, it's really chunky on like the bass notes, right? The way that, the way
Oh,
that you-
sure, because he's playing the higher E and the open E together. A little bit of palm muting.
All right, so talk about the technique a little bit there. So he's playing the open E, and tell me
Right.
about how he's doing that, and talk about the palm muting a little bit.
So the lick is just 3 notes: B, D, B, D, E, right? But then he plays the
Yeah,
whatever you want to
yeah.
call that. I don't know.
That's the
chunking
chunky bass
along.
part I'm talking about.
Right. So now he's playing the octave, right? I'm playing this E up here at the 7th fret on the A string, and I've got the open E together. And with the distortion going, that creates big fat sound. And that sound has to be controlled, which the palm muting is doing, right? So I'm picking with my pick here with my thumb and index finger, but my palm is touching the bridge and touching those strings there, and it gives it that muted, real percussive sound.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example that somebody could be playing the notes right, but they're not getting the sound of the lick.
Right, if they're not giving it the
that's-
attitude.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, like, one of the things that I think emerges from this conversation is just this understanding of what makes a great lick. Because as you said, I think, the most famous licks, like even the Smoke on the Water, the Aqualung, they're pretty simple to play. It's not like they're complex things, but it's how they are played that makes them. I'm trying to remember what somebody said. What kind of rig is Clapton playing on that? He's playing. Oh, he's got a Strat and he's playing in a Marshall stack, and and they're like, because guys say I want to try to get my sound like Clapton. They said no, you have to be Clapton to get your sound like Clapton.
Absolutely.
Not just, so, and that's, I think, what you're showing in the technique and the way that Page plays that gives it its character.
Well, and that's very important. And you also brought up another very important point. The riffs are not hard to play. That's because in order for them to have the impact that they have to be melodically recognizable and simple enough for the average person to grasp. I could sit here and play you jazz riffs all day long that are complicated, and you don't recognize them immediately. But the riffs we're talking about are riffs that even a young child can hear and grasp onto. This is the brilliance of the composition. And by the way, it's not just in rock and roll, because there was a guy, what's his name? The guy who went da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-dum.
Oh, that guy, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. It's simple, and everyone, you get it instantly. Yeah. I mean, obviously, the rest of the composition, and many of these rock and roll compositions, the rest of them are much more complicated. But the riff has to be simple, by definition.
So let's throw out some more. So the Fleetwood Mac song, for example, "The Chain," which I've watched them perform dozens of times, was the opening song of their concert. for all those shows that I went to, and I toured with them for a while, not as a musician, but as their chiropractor. And I can't mention who I worked on because for confidentiality. But spent a lot of time in the United States and Europe with Fleetwood Mac, watching those shows. We talked about on a different show Lindsey Buckingham, and his amazing guitar talent. But also, John McVie is easily one of the greatest rock and roll bassists ever to pick up the instrument. He's played in a lot of bands. He played with Clapton back in John Mayall's and the Blues Breakers, John Mayall's Blues Breakers, etc. But that signature bass lick in the transition at the end of "The Chain" is amazing. Where he goes dum da da dum da 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 dum dum. So what's great is this whole song is like just an amazing wall of sound when you're listening to it live. And then it all gets quiet, and all of a sudden it's just the bass. And in the big arenas, when you hear that bass, it's rocking everybody's chest, and it's that familiar lick, that familiar riff that he plays. And that's so I think that's one of a very, very famous rock and roll riff, that sounds like this. Another one I'm just going to throw out because I think it's interesting. Let's talk about vocal riffs, right? Because people don't really think about that, but I'm going to give you one and tell me this isn't a vocal riff. The Immigrant Song. Robert Plant at the beginning of the Immigrant Song. Check this out. And incidentally, I guess it'd be the Immigrant Song guitar riff, right? I'd call that a riff.
That's a riff.
Yeah.
I love your pointing out the vocal riff, though, Pat. We haven't talked about that. And when you first mentioned it to me, I couldn't think of too many. And then suddenly a light went off. And all of those early doo-wop songs all had vocal riffs.
Right.
Ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ah.
Right.
And then they continue that riff as the lead vocal sang over it. I mean, that's a riff as sure as any of the guitar riffs we've been discussing.
I agree. It's the kind of the signature. You recognize it immediately. It's a series of notes, all those things, and it's got a vibe to it.
Yeah,
So,
lots of attitude.
Joey G, any other ones you want to throw out that
the other ones I had were, what riff I really like? It's funny. Of course, we know Satisfaction and Jumpin' Jack Flash, but I like the opening riff on Gimme Shelter. It's just a very simple. Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's got vocals behind it too that are kind of like make it kind of ethereal.
Yeah, there's that high thing going on. It's funny. Keith Richards. I played in bands when I was younger. None of them any good, of course. But when we played, but the guitar player was good, and he'd play it. But he would, and I found out when I was reading the book Life. I think it was Keith Richards' book, and I don't read guitar magazines, so I would have known this probably in the '70s. But I didn't realize he was tuning it to open G on his guitar, and because it never sounded right when my guitar player was playing it. I couldn't figure out why, because I knew he was playing the right chords.
And also he was doing that weird thing of only playing with 5 strings.
Oh yeah,
Talk about that, Mark. Right. Yeah, because I know Keith Richards did a lot of weird tunings, right? But what about 5 strings?
Well, he took his low E string off, as I understand it, and then he tuned the rest of the guitar to a G. So he must have had his A string down to G. I would think G, D, G, B, and I'm guessing that his high E string was tuned to a D. So everything he played in that tuning required a different shape, and you got a slightly different chord voicing than you could get out of normal, I should say, standard tuning.
I'll jump around to one last one here. The Crazy Train with Randy Rhoads. That's one I don't turn off either.
Yeah, I can never get tired. I mean, I used the word earlier, and I hate to reuse it, but to me, the guitar work in that song is transcendent. Also, it just takes me on a trip. I just feel like when I heard that, I can remember hearing that the first time I heard Crazy Train, and I'm listening, and even to this day, decades later, it's like it doesn't sound like anything I heard before. The first time I heard it, just like it was a whole new experience of the guitar for me. I just feel like Randy Rhoads was, again cut. I wonder if he was alive today. What kind of how he'd be playing, but man. Young guy playing, a whole new style of guitar that I thought was just extraordinary.
Definitely a groundbreaker.
Yeah, good ones, Joey. Mark, you got a few other ones you want to throw out?
Yeah, I got a few other ones. Let's go in some slightly different directions. So, you guys in our show about great guitar players both mentioned Mike Campbell, and that got me thinking about this song. Always my favorite Tom Petty song, and when I thought about it, it's that riff that got me going.
Yeah, I could hear Joey G playing that on piano. He used to, maybe you'll give us a little sample of that, Joe. Yeah, that's like one of those deep in the pocket kind of like it's a, how like some riffs are driving you. That one kind of just draws you in. It's got a
It's a
different
little
vibe to it.
smoky.
Yeah, it's smoky.
Nice word.
Here's a piano one, and I don't know that this quite qualifies for a riff. I'm going to ask Joey G to play it on piano. Incidentally, when I was a young kid, probably barely a teenager, this is the first song Joey G taught me on piano. He was my piano teacher. First one he taught me on piano, and interestingly enough, there's a story behind this. With my daughter, I used to sit her on my lap and play piano, and I play this for her on the piano. And this song is your song, and that opening part on the piano is a signature. I think it's a piano riff. It's kind of an extended introduction, but I think it's a piano riff, and it comes back to it, in the song. And then, of course, the refrain of the song, how wonderful life is while you're in the world. So my daughter, who now is a singer-songwriter, very, very gifted, who, that was so meaningful to her. She remembered from, the time she was a little kid in my lap that we actually have a tattoo over here in our left ribs of our heart with the notes that, the part of the notes that say how wonderful life is while you're in the world. So that song's got a lot of meaning to me. And so, Joey, maybe you can demonstrate that one for us.
Sure.
Do you consider that one a riff, Mark?
We were talking about that, and I don't offhand think of it as a riff, but I have to confess that it certainly fits my definition of the riff, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
I struggle with it too, because the riff is normally a little like more punchier and kind of like kind of a tighter thing. This is more of a flowy, kind of play through the chords, but so anyway, I just don't. I'm going to call it a riff, but I'm sure. And listen in the comments below if you guys want to debate that. It'd be a fun little debate to have. Is the intro to your song a piano riff or not? I could go back and forth on it, but let's just say it's a great signature that's well recognized out there in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was thinking, too, a little outside of the box. Do we consider this a rock and roll song? But it sure is a recognizable riff. And I know this song from the Rolling Stones cover of it more than I knew it from the original. How about... And then he as the song goes on, he moves it to the other key. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was Motown. It was not rock and roll per se, but I don't know.
You're doing
Motown
that-
and rock and roll were kind of, I think they're entwined.
Yeah, My Girl, obviously. That's you're doing that. I guess that's a what were you on, a G major pentatonic scale?
I saw it on a C.
A C. Okay.
That's the original key of the song.
It's basically just a rundown of major pentatonic scale, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's very much, the other way you can think about it is that it's a C6 arpeggio.
Huh.
That would
I wouldn't
be
know how to think of it that way, but I get it.
I understand what you said.
If I remember, Mark, you had me doing, practicing major pentatonic scales, and I think it was on A. So I'm going, and I was like, wait a minute.
I know that.
Yeah, right. So it was kind of like I recognize. So it's funny how you can just find things in there, and it's just simple run right up the scale. But it's and it's a little accent though. It's not like it's not just a. It's
Yeah, plus he slides to the third note. Right?
Well, that's what pros do. Yeah. Now that you're doing that, I'm hearing it. Yeah, interesting. But
there's such a cool moment in that Motown movie where one of the musicians tells the story of him and the guitar player who played that in the diner having something to eat, and the song comes on the radio, and he starts to tell the waitress, "Hey, you hear that?" And then he gets too shy. And he doesn't even say it. And this was, to point out how these guys were so far behind the scenes, even though they made the songs.
I got to tell you, those Motown hits were some of my favorite of all time. I mean, that stuff at the early Motown days was just...
Well, okay, you're giving me an intro here, Pat. The other song I was thinking of, speaking of Motown, was... So, girl, you really got me. No, I'm sorry, I sang the wrong song. I confused myself. I never met a girl who makes me feel the way that you do. You're all right. Right?
Oh, yeah. What's interesting there is I would have sworn you were starting on the Kinks.
Well, I did. I made a mistake. So you have to
okay,
read it.
I liked it.
Because they're the same, right? Girl, you really got me. That's the Kinks. And this is, I never met a girl who makes me feel the way that you do. You're all right.
Does that have some DNA in it of... well, actually, it'd be this is the seminal one, so...
well, I don't know which came
Kinks,
first. I know what you're going to say. The Kinks,
yeah,
exactly.
The Kinks,
Sure.
You really got me.
Well,
the chicken and the egg on this one.
Yeah,
but I think the Kinks is later. No, it
No,
might
the
not
Kinks,
be.
that'd be 64. Well, they're very close. I think the Kinks are slightly earlier.
Yeah, you might be.
But
this
is
they're
one of those
similar-
things
they're
like the
similar
100th
riffs.
Monkey, where once enough people do it, everybody could do it.
Yeah, it becomes this is what they call the spirit of the times.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are two great ones. Actually, I had on my list.
Oh, you did?
You really got me. Yeah. The Kinks.
Well, and you remember that Rare Earth covered it with a more rock and roll attitude.
I love Rare Earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're, and then of course you got Van Halen doing the Kinks song, and they just, and then Eruption, before it comes into and they just rock that song out. I thought they did a great job on it. What another bass riff? What about Money?
That's a great one. And by the way, the only rock and roll song I can think of that's in 5/4 time.
So take us through that a little bit, Mark.
Well, so rock and roll is generally in 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So we went, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, most popular music, not just rock and roll. Most jazz songs, most popular songs. And then there's a certain number of songs that are in 3/4 time, right? Like any kind of a waltz song. Billy Joel, right? 3/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But Money, it's 5. If you count that riff, it's 5 beats. So each measure is in 5, which is very unusual. The only other song I know offhand, the jazz classic by Dave Brubeck. Called Take 5 because of that was unusual.
5/4.
5/4 time. Yeah.
That's great. Great stuff. Okay, so one that nobody's mentioned yet, which I think it's if it's not my favorite rock and roll lick of all time, it's in the top 3. It's got to be Layla. Go ahead, Mark. Wow. Yeah.
What a great song.
Playing
That was
really
really
pieces of it at once.
That was nice, Mark.
I literally wore the grooves off of the Layla album. and then it came out on CD.
If anybody had to say what's my favorite all-time Eric Clapton album, I mean, for all his band, whether it's Cream, whether it's Yardbirds, whether it's his solo stuff, I think I'm going to have to pull Layla. I think as all the songs on that album and the work on it, it's the most passionate album.
I'm with you 110%. Remember, by the way, that's not an Eric Clapton album. That was a band album.
Yeah, well, Derek and the Dominoes.
Derek and the Dominoes, yeah.
Obviously, Clapton being the nucleus. What do you think of that, Joey? Who do you? Is that your favorite Clapton album or no?
I'd have to say yes. My favorite Clapton period is the Derek and Dominoes, that short period.
Yeah.
But I think he has that album, and they did put a live album from the film. I think it was recorded at the Fillmore. I think you had that album, Pat, when you were younger too.
Yeah, Derek and the Dominoes live,
which
doesn't feature Duane Allman, sadly.
It does not. Yeah, but it's interesting. They would they changed up like "What Has Love Got to Be So Sad" to have a little more funkier sound to it.
That's the great track from that album.
It is. I think it is probably the best one off that live album.
That's when I used to remember hearing you play at home on the piano, Joe. "Why Has Love Got to Be So Sad"? Do you remember it?
Oh yeah, I remember that one. I still play that one today.
It gives a little bit.
All right.
All right, guys. In tying up here, what any last riffs we want to throw out there that we believe deserve a mention right now?
I got a few I can throw out here. We were talking Clapton. Let's not leave out Crossroads.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Very important, Clapton.
Do you know? Do you know that?
Oh, sure. You And it's a blues, so he takes the same lick. It's got a little variation to it, but that's one. And while we were talking,
and the solo in that
solo in that is iconic. Yeah. Although I did read recently that was not a live solo. It's a live recording, but that solo was edited heavily from that performance.
Oh, really? So they pieced it together?
Yeah, I did. I don't know if they pieced it together or if they just, cut out parts and then married it to the next part.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. Is that they just
Yeah, they did some brain salad surgery.
I got to tell you, I would never notice listening to this song.
No, it's beautifully done, but I did read that. Don't know if it's true. Quickly, another Clapton song that to me is kind of a riff song.
Yeah. That's on 461 Ocean Boulevard, right? That's on.
No,
no, a little
I don't
later.
know what album it's on because Clapton didn't compose it. I think it first came out in the movie Phenomenon featuring John Travolta and Kira Sedgwick.
You're right. I remember that now.
Yeah, because I owned the CD. I liked the song so much I wanted to learn it, and I went out and bought the CD.
Yeah, it was very cool. The CD.
Yeah, wow.
At least he didn't say 8-track.
Oh, I had. We had 8 tracks in our cars.
That's funny. And Pat, you and I were talking about. And we were even arguing: is this actually a lick?
Is that a lick?
And I thought about it, and I decided it's a lick because you wouldn't just play, waiting for the break of day. I mean, you could. The song stands up, but it doesn't have the same impact as waiting for the break of day.
Yeah, that's Terry Kath, right?
Terry Kath.
He had that that sound
my
that he got out of
God,
his
yeah.
guitar. But I would, I was arguing that I think that's a lick, but it's not, again, it's kind of like, I mean, the last Clapton song you played, I think it's, it's almost in the same category, almost like your song, it's kind of like the chord progression, but doing interesting things with it that turn it into sort of a riff, but it's the line. I think the lines are kind of gray and not black and white here.
Well, Pat, in that vein, what do you guys think of the Journey song? Then, "Don't Stop Believing." Is that a riff?
See, that's
I
kind
would
of
say
chords. Yeah.
Well, it's
I don't know,
both. It's chords
you know
and a
that one,
riff.
Joe?
Because dum, ba-do-dum, ba-da-dum, that's the
Right.
riff.
Yeah.
And then the chords,
It's
we were talking about
Yeah.
that. What was the song you played earlier, Joe, where we had the two hands?
The Toto
The
song.
Toto song.
Toto
yeah.
song, right? Yes.
Yeah, hold the line.
It has that. Yeah, it does have the right hand doing that back and forth type thing, and then
All
the
right, go ahead and
chords.
play. Yeah, you play it, Joe. Nicely played, Joe. That's a classic song again. Is it a riff? Is it not a riff? Yeah, well, it's up for debate, but it's a signature. You recognize it right away.
Mm-hmm.
I got to throw out another one that one of my favorite guitars, and unfortunately he's passed. And I just think an iconic riff, and that's Mississippi Queen. Leslie West and Mountain. That's you know that one, Mark, at all? Or
Yeah, boy, I played that when I was about 11 or 12 in a garage band. Cowbell, right?
Yep.
And then I think he's... so on and so forth. What a great sound Leslie West got.
Leslie West got, just that. I mean, the way he got that sound out of the guitar, and that was. I remember him. I read an interview, once. I can't remember how long ago, but Cream was hot at the time, so Mountain said they wanted, if Cream was at a 10, they wanted to turn it up to an 11, basically, and really like kind of get to the next level, kind of like a Spinal Tap moment.
Wow.
But so that was, and I love their sound, and I remember, I used to listen to Leslie West. He'd come on Howard Stern all the time and just play. Man, could that guy play! And I saw him once. Probably this is going back 17 years when I was still living in New Jersey at the time. And he played this small little, on Route 4, across from where Victor's Music used to be, Mark, where you talked about. There's like a little theater there. They turned into like a little live venue, probably.
Oh, for a little while. Not across from Victor's, across from Sam Ash. Yes, it was a movie theater, and they turned it into a venue for a hot minute.
And they got some good acts there. And Leslie West came and played. I got in there, and I was just sat for like 2 hours of him just playing magnificent guitar, intimate setting, talking to the audience that way. And I remember I bought the CDs he was selling after, and the title of this CD was called Guitarded. And, and I got to look at storage somewhere. I have that thing. But there were some phenomenal guitar tracks on that CD. That guy could play like nobody's business.
Nice. Yeah. I got one more riff I want to throw out because it's from a really unlikely source. Great song.
Paul Simon.
Right, first thing I remember. The whole song is the riff, though. You listen to the track, and it's the same thing as those other ones we talked about, where it's going from, the 1 chord to the 4 chord to the 5 chord.
Yeah. Well, let's lightning round a few now, just to see that, what did we miss? So I think, Joe, you talked about, there's so many famous riffs from the Rolling Stones, right? Mm-hmm. So Jumping Jack Flash, right? Satisfaction, Brown Sugar. I mean, all these songs were, they just all had they're just iconic riffs, rock and roll riffs. I can't remember if it was Mick Jagger or Keith Richards that said that a key to their hooks was starting with the guitar bringing you into the song rather than the drums, like a drum bringing in the band joints. It starts with the guitar, so the drum is always following the guitar as compared to the guitar following the drum. And I never thought about that before, but as they were describing, this was kind of a key to them making hits and creating hooks. I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective. And of course, the Rolling Stones, they were just masters at that. We can't leave out Money for Nothing, right?
Oh,
I mean, that.
wow,
Yeah.
sure.
You know that one, Mark?
What a great, let's see if I remember it. I used to play this all the time. Right back.
That's it. Mark Knopfler, who was in Joey G's top 5 guitarists.
Yeah,
Right?
man, great riff.
Yeah, really, really great.
How
riff.
did we leave that one out? And how about, to get a little more modern, what about...
Oh yeah.
Enter Sandman, right?
So that's a great modern riff. Modern us, that's old
Yeah.
for a lot of other people. One man's modern is another guy's old.
Modern to
that's
these
an old riff.
dinosaurs here, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great riff. You know what? Here's one. I think this was Steve Lukather. So I'll see if anybody can guess what it is. Steve Lukather is the guy who actually played the riff, but the guitar solo in the song was Eddie Van Halen. Anybody got a guess?
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you don't know it,
So people, I don't know, that song I think rocks, and
Oh, yeah.
And that guitar solo is epic. That Eddie Van Halen crafted for that song. There's a story about that too, because I forget, the story is that Eddie, because Michael Jackson was considered pop. Van Halen was a rock, dyed-in-the-wool rock band. And so Eddie, I think, snuck out. He didn't tell his bandmates that he was playing, the solo in that song. There's all kinds of stories around it. It's kind of fable, but another great, very recognizable riff. And I think it's a rock riff as far as I'm concerned.
oh yeah.
Let's do stand the lightning round here. We'll go fast, see if there's any other ones we want to get in. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, how about this from Kurt Cobain? So on and so forth.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I always liked Nirvana, but as more time goes by and I look back and I listen to their music, I'm realizing what a genius Kurt Cobain was. I mean, what a talent that kid had. There's a couple documentaries out on him that are and it's such a sad
Yeah, it's
outcome
it's,
to a
it's
to a
a
life
very
of a
sad
gifted
outcome.
kid. Yeah,
But he really was a great composer. You can't take it away from him.
yeah, he had such a talent. You got any, Joe? That
I'm pretty much run out of them. I didn't write enough down because there's a million more out there, of course.
Sure, of
And
course.
I'm getting old. I like. We talked about the Kinks before. They really got. Yeah, you really got me lick.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was reading about the Who. They had been around a little bit, but they wanted to get noticed, and so Townsend wrote "Can't Explain," which is an interesting, not interesting. It's a 4-chord, a 3-chord opening, I think, whatever it is. But anyway, he was modeling it after the Kinks. You really got me.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I read
Oh,
that.
wow.
He didn't copy it, but he wanted to model it because he wanted to grab the attention of the producer that produced that Kinks album, and it worked.
Okay, yeah, kind of like an inspiration, right?
Yeah.
For a song. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I mean, they all, lack of a better term, borrow from each other or get inspiration. I mean, I once was listening to a long Billy Joel interview, and he talked about, he said, he'd get a song in his head they really liked from another band, like Rolling Stones, who he mentioned a bunch of them. And then he'd say, I heard, I wanted to do something like in the vein of that song. And then he'd play the song that he wrote that was one of his big hits. And then you're going, oh yeah, I could see, the kind of the DNA of that song in this song. It's kind of an interesting thing. So another one I'm going to throw out, just takes me right back to my teenage years, is Iron Man, Black Sabbath. Tommy Iommi, right? Great, like innovative guitarist that really, I think, He's the reason a lot of teenagers picked up the guitar and learned to play
In those
became
days.
professional guitars. Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
Something like
that's
that.
it. I mean, and yeah, I can remember. Obviously, I was too young to do this, but I can remember just like putting on that album and being stoned and listening to it over and over again. It was,
Which part were you too young for?
yeah, all of it. Hey, it was the '70s. What could I tell you?
Yeah.
What they say about the '70s? If you can remember the '70s, you weren't really there. So.
That's what they say.
A couple of others I could throw out. We talked about earlier Hendrix, Foxy Lady. I think that again. I look at that as like Purple Haze. I think Mark and I kind of debated one time. I remember a conversation a while ago. Is Purple Haze, is that a riff or not? So what was your view on Purple Haze, Mark?
I think I came to that it was more of a lead because it was not repeated. I could see the argument much more for Foxy Lady, even though they're chords. Although another great Hendrix riff song comes to my mind. Do either of you guys know this one? Machine Gun, they called it.
Yeah.
That was a
that's another
Hendrix
great
riff
Hendrix
song.
riff. Yeah. So those are things that a couple I'd like to throw out. One that we haven't thrown out, but it's a world famous riff. "Walk This Way," Aerosmith.
That's a great riff.
Don't get old.
And interesting about that riff is that it's you remember, I guess it was Run DMC that did the cover of that song and kind of made it into a rap song, and that's where I think it started leading a lot of people to rap, saying, "Oh, rap could be really kind of interesting and cool," with the variation of that. I remember that MTV video, when they're on two sides of a wall going back and forth, and that was I
think it also gave Aerosmith a resurgence too. I mean, they still had a fan base, but I think it propelled them to another level, a more wider acceptance of their old catalog when people heard that song redone by our DNC.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. It was that I can remember them blowing up again. In essence,
right, that's what I mean. It had a
Yes,
renaissance. Yeah.
it was really a pretty cool thing. All right, guys, really interesting selections that you came to the show with today. So I like it, and I know we're going to maybe get some hate in the comments. So, well, wait a minute, how did you forget this one? Or how come you didn't do this one? Or you guys do too much 60s and 70s rock? There's a whole, other eras of rock and roll. We get all that. And this is just the stuff that, we like to talk about. But I would love for you in the comments to write down some of your favorite ones. Let's see if we can't get a conversation to continue to go here. But looking at rock and roll riffs, I mean, riffs define rock and roll. The stuff we're talking about here, these signatures, these are basically bursts of inspiration that have given people all kinds of really extraordinary experiences. And I think the greatest thing in the world, one of the greatest experiences in the world, I could say for me, and I think maybe you guys can comment on this, is when you get an album and it's a studio album and there's riffs on it that you bond with, that you relate to, that you've played over and over again, and then you go out and you see it performed live. It is like a head rush when you go from the studio experience. There's 20,000 people in Madison Square Garden, and all of a sudden Clapton picks up the guitar and then he hits the Layla riff, and you're just like, you lose your mind in a really good way. So that's the magic of rock and roll as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I think this conversation around what are some of the greatest riffs ever in the history of rock and roll is a really great conversation. Any last thoughts, Joey G? Start with you.
No, I think we covered. I think you're right though. There are stuff from the '80s and into the '90s that we could have included if I could remember them. It's just so many, and then I'll be done with this. We'll get in my car driving, and I'll hear two, three more driving down the road before I said, "Oh yeah, we should use that one." But that's why the comments are important.
Yeah. So
let us
exactly.
know.
Let us know what we forgot that you think we should have included, and maybe we'll include it on a subsequent show. Mark, any final thoughts?
It's been a lot of fun riffing with you guys. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
couldn't help myself.
Good pun.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too because you know that in the comedy world, comedians, that's exactly how they'll say that. That's how actors will say it. We're riffing, right? So funny. And I didn't comment at the time, but there was a point where we were talking about one riff or another, and you 3 or 4 times in a row, Pat, you said this lick, that lick, something about this lick. So that was interesting. We, without realizing it, we're going back and forth.
Well, I didn't want to say it's been fun licking with you, so yeah. I guess I did refer to them as licks once in a while, but when I'm with my friends, I'm riffing.
You're riffing.
No.
So anyway, guys, yeah, let's keep the conversation going in the comments. It'd be really great in this community and rock and roll royalty to kind of like share what their favorite things are. And for those people who have really grown up in kind of the 90s rock and some of the more later era of rock and roll stuff, would love to see the stuff that speaks to you also. So anyway, Joey G, Mark Skanga, great show, great being with you. Look forward to the next one.
You.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Rock and Roll Royalty. We love discussing these types of things, all things rock and roll. If you haven't already, please subscribe. That way you get notified when we're going to have new shows that are posted, etc. And your comments are always welcome. I know they're not always positive comments, but hey, that's the nature of the beast. We're willing to see what people think about what we say and what we discuss, and we want your interaction as a part of this community. So again, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching this episode.